He fired his own son on national television, turned a father-son argument into a global meme, and watched a show that averaged 10 million viewers a week collapse into lawsuits, foreclosure, and years of silence between people who shared the same blood. That man is Paul Teutul Sr., the iron-fisted founder of Orange County Choppers and the thundering heartbeat of one of the most watched reality shows in cable history. And what he's admitted in recent years about the real reason American Chopper fell apart is far more complicated than any argument you ever saw on screen. Paul Teutul Sr. was born in 1949 in Yonkers, New York, and grew up in Pearl River. There was no easy road, no wealthy family waiting in the wings. He enlisted in the United States Merchant Marine during the Vietnam War era. After his service, he came back to New York and started building something from nothing, a fabrication and ironworks business called Orange County Ironworks. Steel railings, structural metalwork, the kind of physical, unforgiving labor that shapes a certain type of man who doesn't back down from confrontation and doesn't have much patience for those who do. But there was a shadow running through those years. From his mid-teens well into his 30s, Paul Sr. struggled with alcohol and substance use. By his own account, written in his 2009 memoir, he had been drinking heavily for 2 decades. He openly admitted he had used marijuana and, in his own words, had done just about every other substance he could get his hands on. On January 7, 1985, he reached a turning point. He made a promise to his then-wife, Paula, that he would get sober. He kept that promise. He attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings for 9 consecutive years without missing a single one. He later said that getting sober was what allowed him to think clearly enough to build a business. That clarity is what eventually produced Orange County Choppers in 1999, and everything that followed. But the years of alcohol, the emotional distance, the patterns formed during those 2 lost decades, none of that disappeared when he put the bottle down. And here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. Orange County Choppers was already building custom bikes and earning magazine covers before any camera crew showed up. The motorcycles were real, the talent was real, the reputation was earned on the floor of a working shop in Newburgh, New York. In 2002, a television producer named Craig Piligian came looking for a bike building show. He had originally planned to center it on a different shop entirely, one in New Hampshire. That shop, in his words, didn't have the right mindset. 2 days later, Piligian was filming at OCC. What he found was not what he expected. He later said that he quickly realized American Chopper was never actually a motorcycle show. The bikes were a byproduct. What the cameras had stumbled into was a family show, specifically a show about the tension between a father and a son. Piligian compared it to I Love Lucy. He was producing a domestic drama, not a documentary about custom fabrication. That distinction matters enormously because it explains the pressure that was building from day one. The network needed conflict. The format rewarded it. Every episode was built around a deadline and an argument, and the Teutuls, who had a very real history of friction rooted in things that had nothing to do with motorcycles, were being asked to perform that friction, amplify it, and repeat it week after week for an audience of millions. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. By season 6, something that had been simmering for years finally boiled over. Paul Sr. fired his son Paul Jr. on camera in September 2008. What viewers saw was explosive. Chairs thrown, voices raised to levels that shook the walls of the shop. The image of Paul Sr. standing over that confrontation became one of the most recognizable moments in cable television history and spawned a meme format that is still circulating today. But in an in-depth interview given in 2026, Paul Sr. himself addressed something that most coverage of American Chopper has consistently glossed over: how much of what viewers saw was shaped, scripted, or directed by producers. He confirmed that the famous firing scene, the one that fractured his relationship with his son in front of millions, involved significant producer influence. The conflict was real, but the framing, the staging, the escalation into what appeared on screen, that was not purely organic. Paul Jr. owned 20% of Orange County Choppers. When the firing happened, that ownership stake became the flashpoint for a lawsuit that dragged on for years. Paul Sr. sued his son, attempting to force a buyout at his chosen valuation. A court ultimately decided the price instead, ruling in Paul Jr.'s favor. Paul Sr. did not attend his son's wedding in August 2010. The rift was not a story arc. It was a real fracture, one that took roughly a decade to begin healing. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. When Paul Jr. left, the show lost its central engine. American Chopper as a concept had been built entirely on the friction between father and son. Without that, there was no show. Not in the way audiences had come to expect. The series was canceled in 2010. The building in Newburgh, a massive, purpose-built facility that Paul Sr. has since admitted was likely an overspend, was surrendered to its creditor, GE Commercial Finance, in 2011 after the Teutul's faced severe financial difficulties. The property sat largely abandoned for years. By 2016, it had sold at online auction for approximately $2.3 million. By 2025, reports confirmed it had been converted into a self-storage facility. The OCC logo that had been built into the brick of the front sidewalk had nearly crumbled beyond recognition. That building, the one fans watched on television every week for years, is now a place where people store furniture and old boxes. The financial collapse didn't end there. In 2017, a business partner named Thomas Derbyshire sued Paul Sr., claiming Teutul had used invested funds for personal purposes during a failed attempt to produce a new television project for A&E called Orange County Choppers, American-made. The lawsuit alleged misuse of roughly $1.8 million. A Miami Herald report from 2016 detailed additional claims involving a group of Central American investors who said they had been defrauded of between $12 and $15 million connected to the OCC Roadhouse restaurant project, an alleged scheme involving the same investment being sold multiple times to different investor groups. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The version of American Chopper that most fans carry in their heads is a show about bikes and blow-ups. But the admission Paul Sr. has made in recent years, across interviews and public appearances, points to something more self-aware than most people expected from him. He has acknowledged that the show warped the relationship it was supposed to document. The pressure to deliver argument-driven content week after week under real production deadlines turned a complicated but survivable father-son dynamic into something that was actively being broken on a schedule. Producers needed the confrontation. Discovery Channel needed the ratings. The Teutuls needed the platform. And nobody stopped to calculate the cost until there was nothing left to count. He has also admitted that building the Newburgh facility, a space far larger than the business could reasonably support, was a mistake driven by the momentum of television fame rather than sound business judgment. The show made him feel invincible. That feeling, he has suggested, led to decisions that made the eventual fall much harder. Paul Jr. put it plainly in a 2024 magazine interview. The show was built around conflict, and conflict was what it ultimately produced. Off-screen, in courtrooms, in years of family silence, and in the empty shell of a building in New York that nobody wanted. She never talked about this publicly. Until now, applies here to the building and what it became. But for Paul Sr., the admission about what the show did to his family is the one no viewer had on their bingo card. Paul Teutul Sr. turned 75 in May 2024. He is still building bikes. The Orange County Choppers brand is now based in Clearwater, Florida, where the OCC Roadhouse and Museum opened in 2021, in partnership with businessman Keith Overton. The venue includes a restaurant and a concert space. The OCC Invitational Bike Show and Biker Build-Off launched in 2023 and returned in both 2024 and 2025, a signal that the brand still carries genuine drawing power among enthusiasts. He attended the 2024 Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, where he presented a custom-built motorcycle. He has also been working with West Coast choppers Jesse James and Billy Lane on a project called Outlaw TV, a member-supported streaming channel aimed at fans of custom bike culture and blue-collar automotive content. An Emmy-winning producer is attached to the project. Paul Sr. has said publicly that he wants this to be the culmination of his career in television. The reconciliation with Paul Jr., which began around 2018, has been incomplete but real. Their 2020 reunion build, titled The Last Ride, was honest about the limits of what two people can heal inside a television format. Paul Sr. admitted he didn't want to do the build because he was afraid it would damage what little ground they'd recovered. That's a quieter kind of honesty than anything the show ever managed to capture. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. American Chopper was never really about motorcycles. It was about what happens when a family's unresolved history gets handed a camera, a production budget, and an audience of 10 million people who want to see the argument get worse. Paul Teutul Sr. built something real, a business, a brand, and in the end, something resembling a mended relationship with his son. But the show consumed the very thing it claimed to celebrate. At 75, he is still building, still competing, and still carrying the weight of a chapter that made him famous by tearing his family apart. Outlaw TV is the next bet, a platform he controls, on terms he sets, without a network deciding what kind of man he has to be for ratings. The question this story leaves behind is a personal one. Do you think Paul Teutul Sr. carries more responsibility for what happened to American Chopper? Or did the television machine itself create a situation no family could survive intact? Let me know where you stand in the comments below.